Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister of Israel. I want to thank Mohan Sinai, assistant of Mr. Barak, and my colleagues at JPC for facilitating this webinar. Ehud Barak is the most decorated soldier of the IDF, was commander of the elite commander unit Sayat Matkal, chief of intelligence, chief of staff of the IDF, prime minister, foreign minister, defense minister, and businessman. Mr. Barak will start with a short introduction, and then we'll open up for Q&A. You are on mute, so please type your question on chat. I'll read them, and Mr. Barak will answer them. Mr. Barak, please.
Good morning to all of you. I'm happy to be here on this webinar with Uri, whom I remember without those glasses as a pilot in our commander and pilot in our Air Force. It's good to see him here, making sure that whatever can be protected of our freedom of the press and everything else around will be really kept alive. I will make a very short, few remarks because I think it's more interesting to hear your questions and probably trying to answer them concretely. In regard to the plague, as I call it, coronavirus, we are part of the world. If I have to describe our situation compared to others, we are a small community characterized by one gate for the world, which is the Ben Gurion Airport, which makes control much easier. And relatively a majority, probably 80% of the society is advanced society with certain kind of a better discipline, may I say, than in probably the Western world advanced communities. So the basic conditions for operation are good. We have extremely capable medical teams, but a very kind of backwarded infrastructure. Just to give you an example in terms of intensive care unit beds, which had personnel behind them, we have about 3 for 10,000 people. Korea has 26, and most major countries have from 8 to 15. So we are well behind in this element. Beyond this, I may say that in the whole country we have no more than 2,800 ventilators or breathing machines, and it's a limit that, as you all know, might characterize the moving from controlled situation to totally uncontrolled one. We started to respond early, but somewhat hesitant, in a hesitant manner. But the very fact that we responded earlier slowed down the development of the plague. We had been with, to those of you who understand exponents, we had been an exponent of 1 to 5, basically, even more in terms of the growth of those who are contracted by this coronavirus. Just 2 weeks ago, we had been doubling the number of people contracted every 3 days. We are now running it around 7 or 8 days. We used to have the heavier or tougher cases, those who need to be hospitalized and taken care of very, very carefully. We were some 2 weeks ago doubling the numbers every 2 days. We are now doubling it about 6, more than 6 days. It goes very well, and to those of you who understand graphs of epidemic kind of control, we are now about with very optimistic results in the last few days, in spite of what happened in Barak and other ultra-Orthodox communities. I will come to it in a moment. We are about the turning of the direction, namely it's still growing, but for the first time, the number of added people who are contracted, and especially the number of added people who are in severe situation starting to go down. If we follow the experience in other countries, it's probably tells us that in about 2 weeks from now, we will see much more relaxed situation. With the present situation of about 200 people in kind of heavy situation, somewhat more than 200, I don't see a real risk that the system will be over-flooded and triage kind of practices will have to take place. We are not there. Assuming, of course, that we will not see a huge eruption in either ultra-Orthodox or other communities which are living very close together and with tradition that makes them kind of more exposed to massive contraction or contagion impact. So basically the problems are basically in the ultra-Orthodox communities and in the elderly homes. And you know, in Israel, if I should say a word about the behavior, all in all, I would say it's better than we could expect it from our system, but we are paying the price of the government which abandoned the health system for about 10 years now, not cutting dramatically the budgets. We are paying much less than the average of the OECD for health, and much less than American society. And you can see it in spite of the great devoted teams. We cannot overcome it easily. So it was the decision-making suffered from overemphasis of appearances of the prime minister and overemphasize on the urgency at the beginning. There was even an attempt to frighten the people, telling them that we are facing the worst crisis since the medieval times. You know, somehow Prime Minister Netanyahu forgot even the World War II, and told people that we are facing 10,000 people will have to be buried. But that's, you know, that's, I don't want even to talk about it, doesn't worth your attention. It's, there was a need to both to explain how comes that we don't have enough, sets for testing viruses or enough reagents to make the checks on the public. So what we need now, you know, in Israel for 12 years now, there is a government decision that under a major national emergency, be it a war, a major earthquake, or a plague like the one we are facing now, the control has to be moved immediately to the hands of the Minister of Defense. Reason is that in Israel, the Minister of Health is just a regulator. There is no any experience, executive experience there. And what is called the National Security Council, it's not exactly the same institute as in the United States. The National Security Council, it's basically a staff of several dozens of people, devoted civil servants. But once again, they are clerks. They don't have, there is no single commander over them. And the prime minister who took over because he was responsible for the health system for a long time and wanted to be at the center of it, he is, as we all know, is one of the best presenters on earth, but a mediocre manager and poor decision makers, and it shows somehow. So because of the basic elements of the Israeli system, we are in a much better situation than Italy, Spain, I know, UK, the United States, or even Sweden. We are more towards the Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea situation, but with one disadvantage. Those countries that I've just mentioned in the East, they experienced the SARS and the MERS, so they were more predisposed, so to speak, to act effectively, immediately, and everyone understood what should be done. That's not the case. That's for the this element. And about the political situation, it happened. Bibi is lucky in a way. It happened that this plague erupted in the middle of an emerging constitutional crisis in Israel. We faced kind of not an ordinary situation where the man at the top, the person who heads the executive branch, had been indicted in 3 severe cases of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust, which happened during his service as prime minister. And he started in a coalition, I call it the unholy alliance, with extremist, ultra-nationalist Messianic groups, which are a small minority in Israel, but with a heavy impact on the right-wing side of politics. He has a kind of unholy alliance with them. They look into pushing Israel toward one state from the river to the sea, which fits into their mindset and vision. And he wants them mainly to make sure that he will avoid facing trial and probably the verdict of a trial. The point is that along years, Bibi was successful in weakening the whole system of those civil servants who have to guard the door, we call it in Israel, I don't know the English term.
Gatekeepers, gatekeepers.
The gatekeepers, yeah. The equivalent of the GAO, the state controller, had been, the previous one was not very strong person and nominated personally by the Netanyahu family, but the new one is just, it's like a joke. It's someone who decided that his role is not just to criticize what's wrong, but also to give compliment to what's good. And and he blocked immediately every sensitive kind of investigation. Both the former head of the police and the present legal kind of advisor to the government, which is also the general attorney, Dr. Mandelblit, they both were nominated personally, picked personally by Netanyahu because he believed that they will protect him. But of course, being somewhat loyal to their roles, they couldn't deliver. And now he intends to replace both by some figurehead that will do whatever he wants. Basically, Israel is going through an attempt on our democracy. It's organized, systematic effort to weaken the Knesset, the legislative branch, and the judiciary branch, and make it all in the hands of the executive branch. And basically, it's the exiting legal advisor of the Knesset defined the situation that happened some 10 days ago when the chairman, speaker of the Knesset, so to speak, decided that his conscience doesn't let him, allow him to follow a ruling of the Supreme Court. That could happen in Hungary, Poland of Kaczynski. I don't want to go further, but not in a normal Israel, but it happened. And the leading minister who aspired to be the Minister of Justice from Likud, he announced that some of the Supreme Court is a kind of enemy of the people. And another one, the Minister of Justice, that also a figurehead, almost, I don't know how to call it, ignorable member of Knesset, became Minister of Justice, and they immediately announced that there is no need to necessarily follow all the ruling of the Supreme Court. So we are in a crisis. And the tragedy is that the public, more than half of the public is against it. So the recent election, a third one, in 1 year. I recommend to all of you to try to see the books of history. What is the previous case of 3 elections in 1 year and how it ended. But basically, Gantz, leading blue and white, he won the election, hardly, but he won it. He got the nomination from the president to establish a government of his own. And he had, first of all, to bring back to life the Knesset. But instead of doing the 3 necessary things, to take over the Knesset, to nominate a speaker from his own party, to build all the committees, including the one that has to control the emergency steps of the government and the fighting of the corona, and to legislate immediately a basic law that will not allow a person who is indicted in bribery or such high crimes to establish a new government for the country. That's obvious in any other normal situation. It didn't happen here. And somehow he collapsed. No one can fully explain it, why he collapsed. Was it kind of, combination of personal weakness, naivete about politics or anything else? But he collapsed and gave up, and now he found himself using the mandate that he got in order to build for Netanyahu a government where Netanyahu will be personally involved. He nominated the general attorney, the state attorney, the head of the police, the head of the investigation units of the police, and 5 of the Supreme Court judges who are supposed to sit on his case when it comes to the Supreme Court. That's ridiculous, the crazy, enormous situation. People would not follow it. So I stop here because I see that the pilot becomes uneasy about my take.
No, I could listen to you forever on this, but there are questions in the meantime. So we'll ask you 2 questions about the political thing, then we'll come back to the coronavirus. You think it's the end of the political career of Gantz? Because like many others before him, whoever been sucked into Netanyahu's trap were finished. And is this the end of the Labor Party?
So I think it's clearly Gantz will not be a bright star. He cannot lead to a victory anymore. The sense of betrayal within his supporters is so deep and profound that, and basically by being so naive, he lost even the leverage that he had a week ago. So for him, it's naivete, for which he will pay the price. For the other guy with him, Ashkenazi, it's more kind of tricky, manipulative behavior. He testified about himself and said once in an interview that, yes, he recognized that he has certain dark side in his character. So probably that was a moment of his dark side. Labor is basically evaporated. Amir Peretz took over from Gabay, arguing that Gabay led to a result that cannot justify his staying in power. He get even lower result. And I don't know. The man had a mustache for a generation, and then he removed it to enable everyone to read his lips that he will not sit under Netanyahu. That's exactly what he's going to do now. That's the crisis within the left is very deep. But my judgment is that I'm probably a permanent optimist. I don't believe that the state we built, fought for, and sacrificed our best friends is going to yield to this. It's just another phenomena. We saw this phenomena in any emerging fascist movement. There were some Weimarian kind of moments, both to the general attorney, to the Supreme Court, and then to Gantz. But I think that it might take time, it might go worse, but we will get out of this.
A word about the Israeli Arabs. There was a conflicting phenomenon here. On one hand, they're more acknowledged, they're more visible, they got more mandates as the elections went on. And at the same time, there's incitement against them, and there's this kind of uh, uh, putting them out of the fence.
Yeah, that's part of the tactics of Bibi. I'll come to it in a moment, but basically, they showed much higher participation. In a way, the efforts of Bibi to isolate them ended up with the opposite. Instead of, usually they had 12 or 13, they now have 16. Probably if you push them to a fourth election, it will be 18 or something. The relative size within the population enable them even to reach 20. And basically, Ayman Oda behaving responsibly. He got more and more sympathy, not just among Arabs. But I'm not sure that the time is right to define Israel by the right wing on one hand and the Arab-Jewish joint party on the other. I don't know. I cannot. It's too early to judge. I don't think that that's the solution. I think the real solution is to redefine the Israeli divide, not by right and left, but by Democrats and anti-Democrats. Basically, the right wing is leading Israel towards a fascist system. And, people don't like the word fascist, but that's, in a way, when it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So it's all these terms, Umberto Eco once wrote 14 elements that define an emerging fascist movement. We probably obey by 12 of them as of now. So it's and we are Democrats. The words left became kind of curse in the Hebrew language as a result of systematic incitement by Netanyahu, but protecting the very principles of the Declaration of Independence, very foundations of Israel, is something people can be still proud of, and I feel very easily telling every political rival, I am Democrat. How about you? Are you against democracy? We see ultra-nationalist movement always were focused on the wrong side of national pride, not the pride for what you have within you, what we donated to the world, the values that we promoted became the standard for modern kind of enlightened societies, but defining ourselves through others. All ultra-nationalist movements, they need an external existential threat, the Amaleks of the day, and the traitors from within. And that's exactly the way that Bibi tries to define Israeli politics. And I am very optimistic. We are strong people. We have a lot of resources. The achievements of the country are not the achievements of Bibi, they are the achievements of the young people, talents, eruption of talents, the startup high-tech industry. I can tell you honestly, 80% of them vote for the left, or for the democratic movement, not for the ultra-nationalists. Of course, there are capable people on the right. I don't want to generalize. But basically, I'm optimist. It might take time. We might go through worse situation, but at certain moment, people will wake up and stop it. If leaders fail to do it, the people will.
Let's go back to the coronavirus. I'll ask you a couple of questions together raised by some of the journalists. So, first of all, what do you think about the lockdown on Passover? It's justified, and what is your take on the exit strategy, whatever it may be?
I have clear views. I entered this arena of tweeting and posting about the development of Corona because I saw a tendency to frighten the people, and I found people frightened beyond the need. It's a tough virus. We don't know everything about it. We don't even know if asymptomatic people keep infecting others, or even those who recuperated, whether they are really immune and do they really stop to spread the plague. We don't know enough, but I saw it, so I looked into the numbers, and it became clear that we are, yes, it's growing, it's still growing. It was growing faster, but now it grows slower from day to day. And I intervened into recommendation of what to do. So basically, I think that after Pesach, for Pesach to enforce social distancing is good. Probably there was certain reluctance to do it in a more accurate way that might point to the Haredic, to the ultra-Orthodox community in a more explicit way. I think that it's a wrong situation. You know, part of fighting such a plague has to do with psychology of the collective and has to do with transparency. You have to be transparent. You have to be able to tell the truth to the people. Don't frighten them, tell them the truth and give them a certain hope, calculated or measured hope. That's not what is done. So instead of closing some 30 or 40 ultra-Orthodox communities and probably all the elder homes, they decided to put it on everyone. But, you know, as a backup plan, it's reasonable. We have to start to exit after Pesach gradually. High-tech before tourism, Tel Aviv before Bnei Barak. You know, in Bnei Barak, they have 2% of the nation's population, and 1 in 7 Israel, 1 in 6 now, probably, no, 1 in 7 Israelis contracted is from Bnei Barak. And if you look at the overall community, the ultra-Orthodox community, it's about 40%. I don't blame them. They are poor people. They suffer from over attention on one hand and under attention and real caring on the other hand. But that's the reality. So I think that we can do it gradually. For example, I'm involved in several high-tech companies. I don't see any problem in activating, but all people are between 20 to 25. You can hardly find there people over 30. They are not at any risk. The virus, however tough, basically threatened only people of our age, Uri. I'm older than you. So, you know, when I was 20, I didn't believe I would reach the age of 30. Now I became a risk group at the age of almost 80.
What about the idea of quarantining only the old people like us?
Yeah, it's a good idea. I enjoy very much. You know, you can see behind me, but in front of me, I have a library like what I see behind you. And our people, our age can, you know, if you are a balanced person, especially if you have a spouse and you can live together, you can have a Zoom dialogue with the grandchildren, sometimes more intensive that you basically have under normal situations. I think that there should be a discipline and kind of fighting spirit. We have to isolate the very old. We can allow, once we put the plague under control, and it's not going to overflow or overwhelm the medical system, we have to start to care about other patients. Look, just have you know, we started to deal with it about 50 days ago. We have about 50 people dead until now. So it's 1 per day. But in the same 50 days, more than 6,500 people died from other cases. So we have to get certain sense of proportion. It's a threatening, tough virus. Probably there will be mutation. Probably it will take time to have the immune kind of shots. But basically, it's not catastrophic, and we should not allow it to become catastrophic through the economic impact. So we have to impose upon ourselves more focused control on whatever sources of breaking the fit of the plague, and at the same time to allow the economy to go back to normal. It will be a new normal to resume tourism or even entertainment on the scale that happened before will take a lot of time. There will be a lot of consequences. All of you understand remote control, remote learning, remote working will get a push. There will be many other developments, but that's not the subject of our discussion.
Two last questions. One is cooperation with the Palestinians about fighting coronavirus, and maybe perhaps it will have ramifications on general relations with them. And the second one is all the cyber actions made to follow people and track people. You think they are endangering democracy? You think they'll stay once the coronavirus goes away?
I think by regard to Palestine, I wrote it in one of my posts several days ago. It's a major threat because if it erupts within the Palestinian society, be it in Judea and Samaria or in the Gaza Strip, we will be perceived. We don't like it, but we will be perceived by the rest of the world responsible for it because we close them from any connection with the world, which probably helped in this case, but is a part of our passing the responsibility to us, and we somehow perceived as being suppressing them economically. So, and not to mention the fact that there is no real border. Just think of Jerusalem. It's not really kind of control it. So I think that there is a risk. We have to take steps to make sure that the Palestinian health system, which is much weaker than ours, much weaker, will not collapse. We have to approach the Gulf states. I will not approach at this time Europe or the United States, but probably China. China is making a mileage in showing generosity, in sharing its capacity to produce and to help. And I think that probably it's time to call them and try to coordinate with the Gulf states to pay for it, with the Chinese to donate and to even to be paid, but to make sure that it will not become a catastrophe or a humanitarian disaster in these millions of Palestinians on both places. The extended security steps, you know, it's I didn't see a great kind of, I don't see it as a great success. There are other elements that are missed. Probably if the Ministry of Defense would coordinate all this, it would be more effective. It doesn't seem to be very effective or contributing a lot. But of course, it's quite disturbing that the decision was made after midnight by a government which has never been elected. And just staying there because of inertia and without any control of the Knesset, because the Knesset was basically strangled to death. The legal advisor said it's a kissed death, but I think it's a kind of death under explicit violence. So that's not a healthy situation. I, happily enough, you know, I happen to know the leadership of our security services. That's not that typical. They're much more stronger. The Shabak, as we call it, the Secret Service, is an organ with a very high integrity and very stable, solid leaders. I'm not afraid that they will be used or manipulated, or they will let it continue beyond the ultimately necessary step. But having said that, there will be more information of the public in the hands of private people. I think that we will have to reassess this whole kind of relationship, but basically in Israel, it was not misused as of now.
Finally, you said we don't see your library, but we also don't see your piano. You have time to play the piano?
No, first of all, the furniture behind me is one of the pianos that I have. That one,
I see.
it's here. This is a piano. So I have, that can even be operated. It's a Yamaha piece that can be operated even without my wife, which works from the other side of the wall, without her hearing it. But I have a big Steinway over there. You know what? I have an apartment here in the same tower, some 12 floors upside, so I drive to work in an elevator and go to sleep with my CIO. I'm the CEO and she's the CIO. And I have pianos in both floors, so I don't know. I study physics and play piano and have my own private gym. That's the advantage of being on the sunny side of life.
Ehud Barak, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. Thank you guys for being with us. Later today, 5:15 p.m., we'll host Yitzhak Herzog, chairman of the Jewish Agency, on the plight of Jewish communities worldwide under the coronavirus and what Israel and the Jewish Agency can do for him. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.